The office buzzed with excitement as colorful flyers appeared on bulletin boards throughout the building. Annual Talent Showcase, they announced in bold letters. Share your hidden talents with your colleagues. May sat at her desk, pretending not to notice the flyer someone had taped to her computer monitor. She scrolled through lines of code, focusing intently on debugging the software application she had been working on for months. As a software engineer at Tech Vision Solutions, May was known for her problem-solving skills and quiet determination. What her colleagues didn't know was that every Tuesday and Thursday evening for the past year, she had been slipping away to a small music studio downtown. You should sign up, said Raj, leaning against her cubicle wall. He pointed to the flyer with his coffee mug. I've already put my name down for my stand-up comedy routine. May smiled politely. I don't really have any talents worth showcasing. Come on, everyone has something, Raj insisted. What do you do outside of work? There must be something. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. The truth was, at 32 years old, May had finally decided to pursue a childhood dream. Growing up, her family couldn't afford a piano or lessons, despite her fascination with the instrument. Now, with a stable job and her own apartment, she had started taking lessons with an elderly piano teacher who lived 3 blocks from her place. I've been learning piano, she admitted quietly, immediately regretting her words when she saw Raj's eyes light up. Perfect. You should totally sign up for that. No. I'm just a beginner, May protested. I can barely play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star without messing up. The showcase isn't about being professional. It's about sharing something personal with everyone, Raj explained. Besides, after last year's showcase where accounting Tom tried to juggle flaming batons and nearly set off the sprinkler system, the bar is pretty low. They both laughed at the memory and May felt her resistance wavering. Maybe this could be a good opportunity to face her fear of performing in front of others. Her piano teacher, Mrs. Wu, was always telling her that she needed to play for an audience someday. I'll think about it, she promised. Later that afternoon, May found herself standing in front of the sign-up sheet posted in the break room. She read through the names already there, Raj with his comedy routine, Diane from HR doing a poetry reading, Kumar from IT performing a Bollywood dance, and several others. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the pen. Joining our little showcase. The voice made her jump. She turned to find Blake, the head of the creative department, watching her with interest. Blake had joined the company 2 years ago and had quickly established a reputation for being brilliantly talented and brutally honest. Rumor had it that he had studied at a prestigious music conservatory before switching to a career in marketing and design. I was considering it, May answered cautiously. Blake nodded, filling his mug with coffee. What's your talent? Piano, she said, the word barely audible. Really? His eyebrows rose slightly. I play as well. Studied for years, actually. What piece are you thinking of performing? May felt her confidence shrinking under his gaze. I haven't decided. I'm still quite new to it. Well, don't worry too much about it. These company events are just for fun, Blake said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Though as the event coordinator this year, I'm hoping to raise the standard a bit. After he left, May almost put the pen down and walked away. But something stopped her, a small voice reminding her of all the times she had let fear hold her back. With a quick motion, she scribbled her name on the list before she could change her mind. That evening, May arrived at Mrs. Wu's small studio apartment for her lesson. The space was warm and inviting, with stacks of sheet music organized in neat piles and a beautiful upright piano that Mrs. Wu had brought with her when she immigrated decades ago. You seem distracted today, Mrs. Wu observed after May stumbled through a simple exercise for the 3rd time. May sighed and told her about the talent showcase and how she had impulsively signed up. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm not ready to play in front of people, especially not colleagues who I have to face every day afterward. Mrs. Wu listened thoughtfully, her weathered hands resting in her lap. At 78, she had the energy of someone much younger, but her eyes held the wisdom of her years. When I was a young woman, she began, I was offered a chance to perform with a small orchestra in my hometown. I was terrified and convinced myself I wasn't good enough. I turned it down. She paused, looking at a faded photograph on the wall of a younger version of herself. It remains one of my biggest regrets. May had never heard this story before. Mrs. Wu was usually private about her past. But you're so talented, May said. I've heard recordings of you playing. You're amazing. Technical skill isn't everything, Mrs. Wu replied. Many people can learn to play the notes correctly. What makes music special is the emotion behind it, the story you tell through the instrument. She stood up and walked to a small bookshelf, pulling out a folder of sheet music. I think it's time we tried something different for you. Something that will help you connect with the piano in a more personal way. The music she placed in front of May looked simpler than what they had been working on, but Mrs. Wu explained that the piece was deceptively challenging. It's not about how many notes you play, but how you play them. This piece has moments where a single note carries the entire emotional weight of the music. May looked doubtful. Will I be able to learn this in time for the showcase? It's in 3 weeks. We'll focus on the first movement only. It's short but powerful. If you practice with intention, not just repetition, you can do it. Mrs. Wu sat beside her on the bench. Now let's begin. For the next hour they worked on just the opening measures. Mrs. Wu was more demanding than usual, asking May to play the same few notes over and over until her fingers ached. But for the first time, May began to understand what her teacher meant about telling a story through music. It wasn't about hitting the right keys in the right order. It was about bringing the notes to life. On her way home, May felt a mix of excitement and terror. The piece was beautiful, and she felt a connection to it that she hadn't experienced with other music she'd practiced. But the thought of playing it in front of her colleagues, especially someone like Blake who would immediately recognize any mistakes, made her stomach twist into knots. The next morning at work, May noticed people glancing at her differently. Word had spread about her signing up for the piano performance. A few colleagues stopped by her desk to express their surprise and support. I had no idea you played, said her team leader. That's wonderful. We're all looking forward to hearing you. The encouragement should have been reassuring, but it only added to the pressure May felt. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering to the upcoming showcase and all the ways she might embarrass herself. At lunchtime, she spotted a memo in her inbox announcing a rehearsal session for the talent showcase participants, scheduled for the following week. The email sent by Blake emphasized the importance of being prepared and mentioned that he would be providing feedback to help everyone put their best foot forward. May forwarded the email to her personal account so she could read it again later. That night she practiced longer than usual, repeating the piece Mrs. Wu had given her until her fingers moved more confidently across the keys. The music was beginning to feel like an extension of herself, a way to express feelings she usually kept hidden. 3 days later, Mrs. Wu surprised her by recording their lesson on her old cassette player. Listen to yourself, she instructed, handing May the tape. Hear the difference between when you're thinking about the notes and when you're feeling the music. May listened to the recording on her way to work the next morning, surprised by how different the same piece sounded at various points. When she was concentrating too hard on playing correctly, the music sounded stiff and lifeless. But there were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when something changed, and the simple melody transformed into something that made her breath catch. Those moments gave her hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this after all. The week flew by faster than May could have imagined. Between debugging a tricky section of code at work and practicing her piano piece every evening, she barely had time to worry about the upcoming rehearsal. But as she walked into the company's conference room that had been cleared out for the occasion, the butterflies in her stomach turned into a swarm of bees. The large room had been transformed. The long meeting table was pushed against one wall, and chairs were arranged in rows facing a small cleared area designated as the stage. In the corner sat a digital piano that looked brand new, its black surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. They rented it just for the showcase, Raj explained when he saw May eyeing the instrument. Blake insisted on getting something decent rather than using that old keyboard from the holiday party. May nodded, both impressed and intimidated. A rented piano meant higher expectations. She clutched her sheet music tighter, wrinkling the edges. Several colleagues were already there, chatting and laughing nervously. Diane from HR was practicing her poetry reading in a low voice in the corner. Kumar was stretching in preparation for his dance routine. Everyone seemed focused on their own performances, which gave May a small measure of relief. Blake walked in carrying a clipboard and wearing a crisp button-down shirt that made him look more like a judge on a talent show than a marketing director. He clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "Welcome to our rehearsal session," he announced. "We'll go in the same order as the actual showcase so you can get a feel for the timing. I'll provide some feedback to help you polish your performances." His eyes scanned the room. "Remember, while this is meant to be fun, we still want to put on a good show." May checked the schedule pinned to the bulletin board. She was slotted to perform last, right after Blake's own piano performance. Great, she thought. Everyone would be comparing her amateur playing to his polished skills. One by one, her colleagues took their turns. Raj's comedy routine about office life earned genuine laughs. Kumar's energetic dance moves impressed everyone. Each performer received a few notes from Blake, mostly constructive suggestions delivered with what seemed like practiced diplomacy. As the rehearsal progressed, May found herself growing more anxious. She kept glancing at the piano, wondering if she should try it out before her turn to get familiar with the touch of the keys. But something held her back, the fear of anyone hearing her practice. When Blake announced his performance, everyone settled into their seats. He sat at the piano with perfect posture, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play a complex classical piece that May recognized as Chopin. His fingers moved with precision and confidence, drawing out beautiful cascades of notes that filled the room. May watched, mesmerized and increasingly discouraged. How could she possibly follow that? After enthusiastic applause, Blake stood and checked his clipboard. And finally, we have May with another piano piece. The room felt suddenly quiet and too warm as May made her way to the piano. She carefully placed her sheet music on the stand, though she had already memorized most of the piece. Her hands were trembling as she adjusted the bench. "Whenever you're ready," Blake said, his pen poised over his clipboard. May took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. She started with the simple opening notes of the piece Mrs. Wu had chosen for her. A gentle, uncomplicated melody that should have been easy to play. But her nervousness made her fingers stiff and uncooperative. She fumbled the third measure, tried again, and hit a wrong note that rang out harshly. She could feel eyes on her, hear the uncomfortable shifting in seats. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she forced herself to continue. The piece that had begun to feel like a natural extension of herself in Mrs. Wu's studio now felt foreign and difficult. When she reached the middle section, where a single sustained note was meant to build and resonate with emotion, her hand shook so badly that the note came out weak and uncertain. She ended the piece as quickly as she could. The final chords rushed and uneven. The silence that followed felt endless before a few colleagues offered polite applause. Mee kept her eyes fixed on the keys, unable to look up and see the pity or judgment on their faces. "Well," Blake said after clearing his throat, "that was interesting." May finally looked up. Blake was tapping his pen against his clipboard, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else she couldn't quite identify. "I appreciate you trying something different," he continued, "but perhaps this piece is a bit too minimalist for a showcase like this. The audience might expect something with more technical elements. Maybe you should consider a simpler beginner piece with more notes to demonstrate your skills. Or perhaps a duet where someone could help carry the melody." A few muffled chuckles came from the back of the room. May felt as if the floor might open up and swallow her, which right now seemed like a welcome escape. "I'll think about it," she managed to say, gathering her sheet music with shaking hands. Blake moved on quickly, discussing the overall running order and making a few general announcements about the showcase. May barely heard him, focused only on controlling her breathing and fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. As soon as Blake dismissed everyone, May hurried toward the door, wanting nothing more than to get away from the pitying glances of her colleagues. "May, wait up," Raj called, jogging to catch up with her in the hallway. "Don't let Blake get to you. He was pretty harsh with everyone." "He wasn't harsh with you," May pointed out. "Or Kumar or himself. That's different. He probably knows more about piano than other things," Raj said, trying to be helpful. "But look, it was just a rehearsal. You have 2 more weeks to practice." May shook her head. "I don't think I'm going to do it. I'll email Blake tonight and withdraw." "Come on, don't give up," Raj pleaded. "First performances are always rough. My first open mic night was a disaster. I forgot half my jokes and someone threw a wadded napkin at me." Despite herself, May smiled a little. "And you kept doing it?" "Sure did. Because I knew I could be better." He patted her shoulder. "Just think about it before you decide, okay?" May nodded, not wanting to argue. But in her mind, she had already decided. There was no way she was going to subject herself to that kind of humiliation again. That evening, she sat in her apartment staring at her small keyboard. She couldn't bring herself to practice. Every time she thought about placing her fingers on the keys, she heard Blake's voice in her head and saw the barely concealed smirks of her colleagues. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was Mrs. Wu calling to ask how the rehearsal had gone. May had forgotten they had planned to check in. It was awful, May admitted, her voice cracking. She described the entire mortifying experience, including Blake's comments and her decision to withdraw from the showcase. There was a long pause after she finished speaking. May expected Mrs. Wu to agree with her decision, to say that perhaps she wasn't ready for a public performance after all. Instead, Mrs. Wu asked, "Did you practice on the piano before playing your piece?" "No," May said, surprised by the question. "There wasn't really an opportunity. Everyone was watching." "Ah," Mrs. Wu said, as if this explained everything. "Each piano has its own voice, its own touch. You need to make friends with an instrument before you can truly play it." "I don't think that would have made much difference," May said. "Blake is right. I'm not good enough. The piece is too simple for someone like me to perform." "Too simple?" Mrs. Wu repeated, an unusual edge to her voice. That piece was composed by one of the most respected minimalist composers of the last century. "It is not simple, it is distilled. There is nowhere to hide in music like that. Every note must carry perfect intention and emotion. That is why I gave it to you." "But Blake, this Blake, does he know everything about music?" Mrs. Wu interrupted. "He studied at a conservatory," May said. "And that makes him the authority on all music, on what is worthy of being played." There was a fierceness in Mrs. Wu's tone that May had never heard before. Music is not just about impressing people with fast fingers and complicated melodies. True music touches the heart. One perfect note played with genuine emotion is worth more than 1,000 played with empty technical skill. May was silent, taken aback by her teacher's passion. Mrs. Wu's voice softened. "Come to my studio tomorrow evening. There is something I want to show you. Something I have not shared with any student before." "What is it?" May asked. "A technique. A way of playing that note. The one in the middle of the piece that will change everything. But it requires courage. Real courage." There was a pause. "Will you come?" May thought about the humiliation of the rehearsal, about Blake's dismissive comments, about the showcase that was now just 2 weeks away. The sensible thing would be to withdraw, to admit that she had aimed too high too soon. But there was something in Mrs. Wu's voice, a certainty, a challenge that made her hesitate. "I'll come," she said finally. "Good," Mrs. Wu replied, "and bring your courage with you." After they hung up, May sat looking at her keyboard for a long time. Then slowly she pulled out her sheet music and placed it on the stand. She wouldn't practice the piece tonight, but she would look at it with new eyes, wondering what secret Mrs. Wu could possibly share that would transform a simple note into something powerful enough to change minds and perhaps restore her shattered confidence. The next day at work felt endless. May kept her head down, focusing intently on her computer screen whenever someone walked by her desk. She had drafted an email to Blake 3 times, each version politely explaining why she was withdrawing from the showcase, but she hadn't sent any of them. Mrs. Wu's words kept replaying in her mind, making her hesitate. During lunch, she hid in a quiet corner of the break room, hoping to avoid conversation. But Raj spotted her and came over carrying his sandwich and a bag of chips. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, sitting across from her. "You've been pretty quiet today." "I'm fine," May said automatically. Then after a pause, "Actually, no. I'm still thinking about yesterday." Raj nodded sympathetically. "Look, everyone has rough rehearsals. Remember 2 years ago when the finance director tried to perform magic tricks and accidentally set his sleeve on fire?" Despite herself, May smiled at the memory. "That was different." He laughed it off. "And you can too," Raj insisted. "Besides, you still have time to practice." May poked at her salad with her fork. "My piano teacher wants to show me something tonight. A special technique for the piece, see?" "That's great," Raj grinned. "A secret weapon." "I don't know if it'll make any difference," May admitted. "You heard Blake. He thinks the piece is too simple." Raj rolled his eyes. "Blake thinks anything that isn't classical music performed by conservatory graduates is beneath him. Did you know last year he told Lily her flute playing was quaint and provincial?" What did she do? Played anyway and got the biggest applause of the night. Raj popped a chip in his mouth. People don't come to these things expecting professional performances. They come to see their colleagues being brave enough to share something personal. May considered this. Maybe Raj had a point, but it didn't change the fact that she had embarrassed herself in front of everyone, or that the thought of facing them all again made her stomach clench. "I'll see what my teacher has to say," she said finally, "then decide." That evening, May arrived at Mrs. Wu's apartment building just as the sun was setting. The old brick building looked different somehow in the golden light, more imposing. Or maybe it was just her nerves making everything seem more significant. Mrs. Wu opened the door before May could knock, as if she had been waiting by the window. "Come in," she said, her eyes bright with an energy that made her seem younger than her 78 years. "We have much to do tonight." The apartment looked the same as always, neat and cozy with the upright piano as its centerpiece. But there was something different on top of the piano, an old wooden box ornately carved with patterns May didn't recognize. Mrs. Wu followed her gaze. "Ah, you noticed. That belonged to my teacher, many years ago in Shanghai. Tonight I will share with you what she shared with me." She gestured to the piano bench. "But first play the piece as you did at your rehearsal. Every mistake, every hesitation. I need to hear exactly what happened." May winced but did as she was told. She played through the piece, deliberately including all the fumbles and wrong notes from the rehearsal. Her fingers felt stiff with the memory of that humiliation. When she finished, Mrs. Wu nodded slowly. "I see the problem. You are playing with your fingers, not with your heart, and that middle note, the one that should carry all the emotion, you are afraid of it." "Afraid of a note?" May asked, confused. "Yes, afraid to truly play it, to give it your full self." Mrs. Wu sat beside her on the bench. "Tell me, when you play that note, what are you thinking about?" May considered the question. "I'm thinking about playing it correctly. About how long to hold it, about keeping my hand steady." "Exactly. You are thinking about the mechanics, not the meaning." Mrs. Wu pointed to the sheet music. "This note, it is the heart of the piece. When the composer wrote it, he was trying to express something beyond words, a feeling so pure and powerful that it needed just one perfect sound to convey it." She reached for the wooden box on top of the piano and carefully opened it. Inside, nestled on faded red silk, was an old photograph and what looked like a small, smooth stone. "My teacher gave me this box when I was not much older than you," Mrs. Wu explained. "Inside is her most precious possession, a river stone from her childhood home and a photograph of her family before the war separated them. She taught me that to play with true emotion, you must connect your music to something real in your life, something that matters deeply to you." Mrs. Wu took the stone and placed it in May's palm. It was cool and surprisingly heavy for its size, worn smooth by water over countless years. "Close your eyes," Mrs. Wu instructed. "Hold the stone and feel its weight, its solidity. Now think of a moment in your life when you felt something powerful. Joy, sorrow, love, fear. Something so strong it changed you." May closed her eyes, the stone cool against her skin. Her mind drifted to different moments, graduating college, landing her first job, losing her grandmother. But none of these felt right for the music. Then she remembered something from her childhood. She was 10 years old, standing in the doorway of a music store with her mother. Inside was a beautiful piano, and a girl about her age was playing it while her parents watched proudly. May had tugged on her mother's sleeve, asking if she could learn to play too. Her mother had looked down with sad eyes and said, "Maybe someday, little one, when we can afford it." That moment had stayed with her, the longing, the understanding of sacrifice, and beneath it all, a quiet determination that someday would come. "I think I have something," May said softly, opening her eyes. Mrs. Wu nodded. "Good. Now place the stone on top of the piano where you can see it. It will remind you to stay connected to that feeling." She positioned May's hands over the keys again. "For this special technique, you must understand that a piano note is not just the moment when the hammer strikes the string. It lives in the preparation before and the resonance after. It is like a story with a beginning, middle, and end." Mrs. Wu demonstrated, playing the middle note of the piece with such care and intention that it seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with meaning. Before you play, breathe deeply and connect to your memory. As you press the key, pour that feeling into your fingertip. And as the note sounds, imagine it carrying your emotion out into the world. But how do I make one note so powerful? May asked. That is the secret, Mrs. Wu said with a smile. It is not about force or volume. It is about resonance. She pointed to a crystal glass on a nearby shelf. If you tap that glass, it makes a small sound. But if you run your finger around its rim with just the right pressure and speed, it will begin to sing all on its own. She turned back to the piano. The piano is similar. Each note has a perfect point of resonance, a way of being played that makes the string vibrate most freely, that allows the wood of the piano itself to become part of the sound. Finding that point is partly technical skill, but mostly it is about listening with your whole self and connecting deeply to the instrument. For the next hour, Mrs. Wu guided May through exercises focused just on that one note. They explored different ways of pressing the key, of breathing, of sitting. Mrs. Wu adjusted May's posture, the angle of her wrist, the curve of her finger. She had May play the note while thinking of different emotions. First joy, then sorrow, then longing. Feel how the same note changes with your intention, Mrs. Wu explained. The piano responds to what is in your heart. Gradually, May began to understand. There was a sweet spot, a perfect balance of pressure and release, where the note seemed to bloom, growing richer and more complex the longer it sounded. When she found it, Mrs. Wu nodded in satisfaction. There. You feel it now, yes? That is the resonance point. May nodded, amazed at the difference in the sound. It's like the note is alive. Exactly. Now play the entire piece again, but carry that same intention and awareness through every note, especially that middle one. May took a deep breath and began to play. This time she kept the image of her childhood self in mind, that mixture of longing and hope. As she approached the middle note, the heart of the piece, ngo, she focused on finding that perfect resonance point again. When she played it, the note seemed to fill the room, growing in intensity rather than fading. It vibrated with the emotion of that childhood memory, with the years of waiting, with the joy of finally fulfilling that dream. May was so caught up in the sound that she almost forgot to continue the piece. When she finished, the last notes hanging in the air, she looked up to find Mrs. Wu watching her with shining eyes. That, Mrs. Wu said softly, is music. It felt different, May admitted, like the piano was playing itself almost. That is how it should feel when you find the true voice of the instrument. Mrs. Wu closed the wooden box carefully. This technique, it is not just about playing a note. It is about opening yourself, about being vulnerable enough to share something real through your music. May thought about the upcoming showcase, about Blake and her colleagues. But what if it doesn't work when I'm nervous? What if I can't find that feeling when everyone is watching? Mrs. Wu placed a gentle hand on May's shoulder. That is where courage comes in. True performance is always a risk. You open yourself not knowing how others will respond, but that vulnerability is also what makes it powerful. She smiled. And remember, you only need to find that perfect resonance for one moment, one note, to change how people hear everything else. As May prepared to leave, Mrs. Wu handed her the smooth river stone. Take this. Keep it with you when you practice, when you perform. Let it remind you to stay connected to what matters. I can't take your stone, May protested. Your teacher gave it to you. And now I give it to you, Mrs. Wu said firmly. This is how knowledge passes from one generation to the next. Someday, perhaps you will pass it to someone else who needs it. On her way home, May clutched the stone in her pocket, feeling its cool weight against her palm. For the first time since the disastrous rehearsal, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this after all. The 2 weeks before the showcase passed in a blur of workdays and practice sessions. May spent every evening at her keyboard, the smooth river stone placed where she could see it, reminding her of Mrs. Wu's teachings. She practiced finding that perfect resonance point again and again, learning to trust the feeling when it came. At work, she kept mostly to herself. A few colleagues asked if she was still performing in the showcase, clearly expecting her to say no. When she confirmed that she was, their surprised expressions only strengthened her resolve. She had withdrawn her draft emails to Blake and instead sent him a brief message confirming her participation. The day before the showcase, Raj stopped by her desk as they were packing up to leave. Ready for tomorrow? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be, May replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. You've been practicing a lot? May nodded. Every day. My neighbors probably hate me by now. Raj grinned. That's dedication. I've just been running through my routine in front of my bathroom mirror. He hesitated. Look, whatever happens tomorrow, just remember that getting up there takes guts. That counts for something. Thanks, May said, genuinely touched by his support. I'm just trying not to think too much about it. That night, May could barely sleep. She kept running through the piece in her mind, imagining herself on stage. Sometimes in these mental rehearsals, she played perfectly and received thunderous applause. Other times she froze completely, unable to play a single note while everyone stared. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to her keyboard. With headphones on to avoid disturbing her neighbors, she played through the piece one last time. The middle note resonated just as Mrs. Wu had taught her, carrying the emotion of her childhood memory. If she could just recreate that tomorrow, maybe it would be enough. Morning came too quickly. May went through her usual routine in a daze, her mind focused on the evening ahead. At work, there was a buzz of excitement about the showcase. Several departments were planning to attend, and the company had arranged for drinks and snacks afterward. May tried to focus on her coding tasks, but found herself making careless errors that took twice as long to fix. By lunchtime, her stomach was in knots, and she couldn't bring herself to eat more than a few bites of her sandwich. You should eat something, Raj advised when he found her picking apart her lunch in the break room. You need energy for tonight. I don't think I can, May admitted. I feel like I might throw up. That's just nerves. Happens to everyone. He pushed an apple toward her. At least eat this. Trust me, you don't want to get lightheaded on stage. May took a small bite of the apple to appease him, but even that was difficult to swallow. The afternoon dragged on endlessly. At 5 o'clock, people began to head to the large conference room where the showcase would be held. Unlike the rehearsal, tonight's event would have a proper audience, and not just the performers, but also many of their colleagues who wanted to watch. May lingered at her desk, her hands cold and clammy. The river stone sat next to her keyboard, and she picked it up, running her thumb over its smooth surface. She thought about Mrs. Wu, about all the hours of practice, about her 10-year-old self staring longingly at that piano in the music store window. Taking a deep breath, she slipped the stone into her pocket and headed for the conference room. The space had been transformed since the rehearsal. Someone had strung small lights around the perimeter, giving the room a warm glow. Rows of chairs were arranged in a semicircle, more than May had expected. Near the makeshift stage area, a table held bottles of water for the performers. The rented piano stood in the center, gleaming under the lights. Blake was bustling around, checking his clipboard and giving last-minute instructions to everyone. He barely glanced at May when she arrived, just nodded and said, "You're still last on the program. There'll be a short break after my piece." May found a quiet corner to sit and wait. One by one, her colleagues took the stage. Raj's comedy routine had everyone laughing, especially his jokes about the office coffee machine that seemed to have a personal vendetta against the accounting department. Diane's poetry was unexpectedly moving, bringing a few people to tears with her words about her mother's battle with illness. Kumar's Bollywood dance routine got everyone clapping along with the rhythm. Blake kept the program moving smoothly, introducing each performer with a brief, polished introduction. When it was his turn, he took his place at the piano with the same confidence he had shown at the rehearsal. His classical piece was flawlessly executed, each complicated run of notes precise and perfectly timed. The audience applauded enthusiastically when he finished, and he acknowledged them with a small bow before announcing a 10-minute break. May's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was her last chance to back out. She could slip away during the break, and most people probably wouldn't even notice. But the weight of the stone in her pocket reminded her of Mrs. Wu's words about courage and vulnerability. She made her way to the piano, wanting to familiarize herself with it before everyone returned. The keys felt different from her keyboard at home, with more resistance and a deeper action. She pressed a few notes very softly, getting a feel for the instrument. Warming up? Blake's voice made her jump. He had returned from the break early and was watching her with a curious expression. "Just getting used to the keys," May explained. Blake nodded. "It's a good instrument. Better action than most rentals." He hesitated, then added, You know, if you're still nervous about your piece, I could announce that you've decided to play something else. No one would know the difference. May felt a flash of irritation. Even now he assumed she would fail. No thank you, she said firmly. I'm playing the piece I prepared. He shrugged. Your choice. Just trying to help. People began filing back into the room, taking their seats. May returned to her corner, her heart racing. She slipped her hand into her pocket, feeling the smooth contours of the river stone. Closing her eyes, she tried to center herself, to connect with that feeling Mrs. Wu had helped her find. All too soon, Blake was back at the front of the room. For our final performance of the evening, he announced, we have May from software development who will be playing a piano piece. A polite applause followed as May walked to the piano. Her legs felt wobbly, and for a moment she feared they might give out entirely. But somehow she made it to the bench and sat down, adjusting it slightly. The audience fell silent, waiting. May placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. She could see Blake in the front row, arms crossed, watching with what looked like skepticism. Behind him sat Raj, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. May closed her eyes for a moment, pushing away all thoughts of the audience. She remembered Mrs. Wu's instructions. Before she played, she reached into her pocket and placed the river stone on top of the piano where she could see it. Then she connected to her memory, that little girl looking through the music store window, the mixture of longing and hope she had felt. With that emotion filling her, she began to play. The opening notes were simple but deliberate, each one carrying a piece of her story. She focused on making each note matter, on finding the resonance in the instrument, on letting the piano speak through her fingers. As she approached the middle section, the heart of the piece, she could feel the room's energy shift. People who had been shifting in their seats grew still. The usual small sounds of an audience, coughs, whispers, the rustle of movement, faded away. Even the air seemed to grow expectant. May reached the crucial note, the one Mrs. Wu had taught her to play with her whole self. She took a breath, connected deeply to her memory, and pressed the key with perfect intention. The note rang out, clear and pure. But unlike in the rehearsal, this time it didn't fade. Instead, it seemed to grow, resonating through the piano's wooden body and filling the room with a sound that was both simple and complex. It vibrated with emotion, with years of waiting, with childhood dreams, with newfound courage. May kept the key depressed, letting the note live and breathe, finding that perfect resonance point Mrs. Wu had taught her. The sound seemed to hang in the air, touching something in the stillness of the room. Time seemed to stretch. In that suspended moment, May opened her eyes and saw the audience. They were completely still, many with expressions of surprise or wonder. Blake's arms had uncrossed, his clipboard forgotten in his lap. Raj was smiling, but it wasn't his usual grin. It was something softer, more genuine. The note continued to resonate, filling the space with its pure sound. It wasn't loud in the conventional sense, but it had a presence that commanded attention. It was as if that single note contained an entire story, her story. When May finally released the key and moved into the closing section of the piece, the spell remained. She played the final notes with the same intention and connection, each one a natural continuation of that central moment. When the last note faded away, the room was completely silent. For a terrifying second, May thought they had hated it. But then the applause began, hesitant at first, then building into something enthusiastic and genuine. She looked up to see people rising to their feet, their faces animated with surprise and appreciation. As she stood to acknowledge the applause, her eyes met Blake's. He was clapping too, his expression a mixture of confusion and something that might have been respect. May gave a small humble bow, just as Mrs. Wu had taught her, then picked up her river stone and slipped it back into her pocket. The weight of it felt different now, not just a reminder of what she had learned, but proof of what she had accomplished. One note, played with perfect intention and genuine emotion, had changed everything. The applause continued as May made her way back to her seat, her cheeks warm with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Colleagues she barely spoke to in the hallways were smiling at her, some reaching out to touch her arm or shoulder as she passed. Raj gave her an enthusiastic high five when she reached him. That was incredible, he whispered as Blake took the stage again to close the showcase. What did you do differently? It sounded nothing like the rehearsal. May touched the stone in her pocket. I found the right way to play it, she said simply. Blake wrapped up the event, thanking all the performers and inviting everyone to enjoy refreshments in the break room. As people began to mingle, moving toward the drinks and snacks, May found herself surrounded by colleagues eager to talk to her. "I've never heard anything like that," said a woman from accounting. "It was like that one note was alive somehow." "Where did you learn to play like that?" asked someone else. "Are you classically trained?" The questions came from all directions. May, overwhelmed by the attention, answered as best she could, explaining that she had only been taking lessons for a year and that her teacher had shown her a special technique. "Well, it was beautiful," said the head of the marketing department. "Simple but powerful. Made me think of—" He paused, searching for words. "I don't know exactly, but it felt important." May thanked him, touched by the genuine response. As the crowd around her thinned, she noticed Blake standing off to the side, watching her with a thoughtful expression. When their eyes met, he made his way over. "That was unexpected," he said, his usual confident tone replaced by something more hesitant. "I don't think I've ever heard that piece played quite that way before." May wasn't sure if this was a compliment or criticism. "My teacher helped me find a different approach to it." Blake nodded slowly. "Your teacher must be quite something. Most instructors focus on technical skills first, especially with beginners. But what you did with that middle section—" He shook his head slightly as if still processing it. "You made one note say more than most people can with an entire concerto." Coming from Blake, with his conservatory background and obvious technical skill, this acknowledgement meant more than all the other compliments combined. May felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with embarrassment. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "That means a lot, especially from someone with your background." Blake looked slightly uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Well, I should apologize for what I said at the rehearsal. I completely misunderstood what you were trying to do with the piece." He hesitated, then added, "Sometimes those of us with formal training get too caught up in technique and complexity. We forget that music is ultimately about communication, about making people feel something." Before May could respond, they were interrupted by the company's CEO, who had attended the showcase and wanted to congratulate all the performers personally. By the time May had a moment to herself, Blake had moved on to chat with other colleagues. As the evening wound down, May found a quiet corner and took out her phone to text Mrs. Wu. "It worked," she wrote simply. "Thank you." The reply came almost immediately. "Not me. You found the music in yourself." The next morning, May arrived at work to find a small crowd gathered around her desk. On it sat a beautiful potted orchid with a card signed by several colleagues, thanking her for her performance. Throughout the day, people who had never spoken to her before stopped by to chat or compliment her playing. "You're a celebrity now," Raj teased at lunch. May laughed. "Hardly. Everyone will forget about it by next week." But something had shifted, both in how others saw her and in how she saw herself. The quiet software engineer who kept to herself had shown a different side. Vulnerable, emotional, authentic, and people had responded to it. That evening, she called Mrs. Wu instead of texting. "I still can't believe what happened," she said after describing the showcase in detail. "It was just one note, but everyone acted like it was something special." "It was special," Mrs. Wu replied. "True music always is. You opened yourself and played with honest emotion. People recognize authenticity, even if they don't know what to call it." Blake apologized for what he said at the rehearsal, May told her. "He even complimented my playing," Mrs. Wu chuckled. "Ah, so the expert had to reconsider his expertise. That is good for him. He said I made one note say more than most people can with an entire concerto. And he is right. This is the heart of music, not how many notes you play, but how fully you play them." There was a smile in Mrs. Wu's voice. "So will you continue with your lessons now?" "Of course," May said without hesitation. "I feel like I've just started to understand what playing the piano really means." "Good. Next week we will begin a new piece, something that will challenge you in different ways." After they hung up, May sat at her keyboard, the Riverstone in its now familiar spot where she could see it. She played the piece again, finding that perfect resonance in the middle note just as she had at the showcase. The sound filled her small apartment, carrying with it memories and emotions and possibilities. A week later, May was working at her desk when a company-wide email appeared in her inbox. It was from the CEO, announcing a new initiative. The company would be sponsoring free music lessons for employees and their children through a partnership with a local music school. The email mentioned the positive response to the talent showcase and the value of creative expression, alongside technical skills. Raj appeared at her cubicle minutes later. "Did you see that email? They're going to offer music lessons. You should totally teach a class," May laughed. "I'm nowhere near qualified to teach. I've only been playing for a year." "Yeah, but you've got that special something," Raj insisted. "That thing you did with that one note. I bet lots of people would want to learn that." "That's not something you can teach in a beginner class," May explained. "It took me months of practice just to be ready to learn that technique." But the idea stayed with her, taking root slowly. That afternoon she received another email, this one directly from the CEO's assistant. The company was forming a small committee to help implement the music program, and they wanted May to be part of it, to share her perspective as someone relatively new to music. When she mentioned this to Mrs. Wu at their next lesson, her teacher nodded approvingly. "You see, one moment of true music creates ripples that spread outward. Now others will have the chance you did not have as a child." May thought about the little girl she had been, looking through that music store window. "I could suggest scholarships for kids whose families can't afford lessons or instruments." "An excellent idea," Mrs. Wu agreed. "And perhaps you could speak to them sometimes, tell them your story." "My story? It's not very exciting. I just took some lessons and played in a company showcase." Mrs. Wu shook her head. "No. Your story is about waiting years for a dream, then finding the courage to pursue it despite doubts and setbacks. It is about discovering that true expression comes not from technical perfection, but from emotional honesty. That is a story worth sharing." 3 months later, May stood in the community room of the local music school, watching as children and adults alike tried out different instruments at an open house for the new company-sponsored program. A special fund had been established for scholarships, and already several children from low-income families had been enrolled. In a corner of the room, a young girl about 10 years old sat at a keyboard, tentatively pressing keys with one finger. May recognized the look of longing on her face. It was the same one she had worn all those years ago. May approached her quietly. "Would you like to learn how to play?" The girl nodded, eyes wide. "But my mom says we probably can't afford lessons." "There's a scholarship program," May explained. "I could help you apply for it." Hope bloomed on the girl's face. "Really? Do you think I could learn to play well?" May reached into her pocket and felt the smooth riverstone that she still carried with her. "I know you can. Sometimes all it takes is finding the right note, just one perfect note, and everything else falls into place." She sat down beside the girl and placed her fingers gently on the keys, showing her a simple pattern to follow. As the child began to play, May caught sight of Blake across the room, now volunteering as a teacher in the program. He nodded to her with newfound respect, a silent acknowledgement of how much had changed since that day in the rehearsal room when he had laughed at her playing. The riverstone felt warm in her pocket as May turned back to the young girl beside her. The circle was complete. What had begun with a child looking through a window at an impossible dream